Welcome. I called this meeting of the Governance Committee to order. I'll start with a roll call. Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Tabor.
Present.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
And I'm Councilor Cook, and I am here as well, and we're joined by many members of the legal team this morning. And I think we have some distinguished guests too that will be joining us. So our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the May 12th, 2025 Governance Committee meeting. Did everyone have a chance to review those?
Yes. I move we approve.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. We're going to start today with our discussion of Chapter 1, the Administrative Code updates. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to our Deputy Manager, Suzanne Woodland.
So just to kind of refresh everyone's recollection as to how it is we wound up with these conversations related to the scope of duties and responsibilities for IT and HR, is that we are looking to update all of let me get to the right section, Chapter 1, Section 1, which deals really with the organization of city government. And so as you'll recall, and as I included in your packet, just as a reminder that we've been looking at all of the departments and going through and updating the language relative to those departments. So city clerk and library and rec. And so we had that conversation back in February, and out of that conversation, we focused in on sort of two departments where we are looking to make changes that we believe are more in accord with the city charter and where this current council would like to go in terms of both human resources and IT. And so we've had some input, conversations, and kind of trying to find the way to recognize that there are historic practices that have been in place, but we now have sort of evolved on the municipal side of the house, both IT and HR, and trying to find the path through to that continuing evolution. And really that's where we're trying to find that balance point. So what we've got, and we can start with whichever you prefer. I can walk through the IT language first if you'd like.
That's great. And for those at home, I shared with you in the meeting packet, you can see the more broad changes, but also this language. So
Exactly. So this first document that we have, I've tried to keep the history of the conversations that we've had in this committee. So we have at the top the existing language that is in current section of Chapter 1. We have the language from February and March meetings of this committee. We then had some back and forth from the departments, and there was some revised language that I brought forward on May 12th. At the May 12th Governance Committee meeting, there was input from the committee, again, trying to find the right balance and path through, and you'll see that. And I took that language from May 12th, sort of what I heard from the committee, and tried to reflect in that track changed version that you see. And then I ran it by Ryan Babcock, our Chief Information Officer, and he said, let me suggest just a slight tweaking of this to kind of, again, find that balance point of, the uniqueness of what both the PD and schools have, but his overarching responsibility to make sure the systems are secure, et cetera, and trying to walk the walk and, find the path through, knowing that things are evolving, and this is not about positions. This is really about how we make sure that we have that path going forward for efficiencies and security. So that's what you'll see in the final paragraph. And so I would start with that, and then Councilor Cook, however you'd like to approach that conversation, happy to make that work for you.
I guess first I'll take questions from committee members about the new language that's suggested today, the June 2nd language. Are there any questions about that or comments?
It seems like a natural progression to what feels to be the most suitable language.
Yeah, I mean, it's more concise, less wordy, more direct. I don't know that we need all the detail that was in the June 12th,
The May 12th.
I'm sorry, May 12th, yeah. Yeah, I did not write this down, but there was some place where I thought there was a little bit of redundancy in language. It's just a little wordsmithing, I guess, but I'll have to go through it again and just look at it.
Yeah, it's been a progression, as the assistant mayor says. I think the questions we talked about last time were, what's the chain of command? And I'm an advocate, I think, for having the CIO ultimately have the various IT work groups report in to the CIO office. So I think this accomplishes that.
I think that was part of the goal, which is to recognize the overarching responsibility, but not the micromanagement, the day-to-day kind of responsibility, recognizing it's a team, and to the extent we're all on the same team, trying to pull in the same direction, just trying to find that path.
And I realize that other people may not agree with that, and we'll all benefit from hearing the arguments on either side.
I would agree that there has to ultimately be some overarching responsibility. And the reason is that in our governance structure, there's an overarching responsibility. So if something happens that that we don't have kind of some oversight and support in, it doesn't matter where it happens in the city government. It ultimately will be the responsibility of the city manager and of the city council, even if there are other governing structures in between, because there will be financial impacts. So you think about it like a cyber attack on a department. Even if they have a governing structure, there's a financial impact that the council has to address. So in that same sense, I think that there should be some overarching responsibility. So I think the new language is clean.
Yeah, I was happy to give up any views and attachments that I had, because sometimes people come up with better language.
That's good. Any other comments, concerns? How does everyone feel about opening up the discussion now? Do you want to go through let's go through the HR language too first, and then we can discuss both. I think there's probably less concern there, but that we would get through both. If that's okay with everyone.
Sounds good to me.
Great.
Okay. So HR. Yep, so what you'll see again, same framework, what's in the existing ordinance where we started February and March, some proposed language from May 12th, and then at the May 12th Governance Committee meeting, I took input from the Governance Committee and wrapped that up, which you'll see in the sort of track changed language. In that final section for June 2nd. I ran this by the Human Resources Director. She was comfortable with this language just as it was. And again, similar thing, recognizing there's a lot that gets done within some of these other unique departments in terms of handling the day-to-day employment-related issues that arise, and that happens with in any department, actually. And then at some point, things pop up to, the human resources director level and need for input and intervention. And I think what we are looking forward to is, there are times when you need a unique platform, as we've heard from the PD in terms of their hiring, and that most officers use a particular platform for that hiring, that there are appropriate places for that uniqueness, and then there may be other places where we don't want uniqueness and want common platforms, whether it's for HR or finance, because we have that whole conversation happening about our evolution, and it really is again, we're all on the same team, and the question is, how do we most efficiently accomplish the city's goals as both they're articulated by the city council and by, the other management and master planning principles. So I think, it's not a one size fits all. It's requiring, relying on the professionalism of everyone to figure out the best path forward, but ultimately having some point of responsibility to hold people accountable and make sure that changes are implemented or solutions are effectuated. If we have a problem, then we need to fix it and know who to go to fix it, so.
I guess I had a question of why you're breaking out this last paragraph, all technology acquisitions affecting human resources, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have a statement like that for the police, for school, and I just wondered why it appeared here.
So that was the request of some similar language in the IT one, I thought we had.
Yeah.
I think there was a request at the last meeting to try and make that language sort of carried forth. And I will say this, that goes to that conversation we were just having, which is when you've got something, a new technology that's going to be deployed across departments, it's going to be an individual, have a discussion with the department. Is it the right tool for that department? It doesn't need to be there, it's extra detail, but that was that conversation kind of carrying forth as to what we heard before. Like sometimes there's a unique platform that's appropriate for the department given the employees or potential employees that we're looking to recruit, and sometimes actually no, the same platform will work, and it's just case by case analysis. But I don't think that sentence is needed because I think it's implied. However, there was a request at the last meeting to do something similar, so I was sensitive to that request of the committee.
Yes, Councilman.
I would suggest that we say responsible for supporting hiring, training, retention, and development of skilled workers.
Okay, which sentence are you at?
The very first.
Okay.
As we're strengthening our annual reviews.
Yep.
That's a discussion of how people can be better at their jobs. It's also a chance to spot people who have talent to move up and what kind of development do they need. So, I think that's a forward-looking function of HR that would be great to see us do.
And we are doing it, so I'm happy to add that, so. Since we're doing it on the municipal side. I know.
Is everyone else comfortable with that language, adding in development there? Okay. I'm comfortable with it.
So it'll read, Human Resources and Negotiations Department is responsible for functions that support the hiring, training, retention, and development of a skill. Okay, just so I get it right.
That's something that I do think that a lot of our departments do very well, is development work, so it's good to recognize it, I think, Eric.
Well, and you need a voice to say, this person could benefit from some training, let's budget for that.
Yes.
Any other comments, concerns about the HR language? No? Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to a few of our guests. Would any of you like to join us? Chief?
That's just a copy of the actual full charter language rather than just pulling up the paragraphs. And what we did was go through each sentence, references you guys have there, gave examples and reasons why or why not we were in agreement with the language, and gave recommended language. I think for the most part, we're fine with the changes that are there. I mean, it's all about collaboration. We've always been collaborating, but there are some unique and specific things to our department, the school department, the fire department, are the things that decisions that we have to make that don't work with city HR or maybe even city IT. I have Daisy here with me to talk on the IT stuff and Eric Benson to speak on the HR stuff, but particularly to the IT is we are on a separate highway than the rest of the city. So we're running on two different highways, which was requested on the city's side to separate. So and yes, we'll overall see the cybersecurity and we'll obviously work with him and everything we do, they collaborate to. All of our equipment already goes through IT, so they're aware of anything that we get. But he runs the city's highway and Daisy runs the PD's highway, and then collaboratively they have to work together. So this language that we have presented, I think, allows for that and clarifies the roles of each, but again, states that we're always going to be there. So Daisy, if you want to come up and talk about your IT, you're up.
Hello, Daisy Lavoy, IT manager for the Portland Police Department. We just wanted to clean up some of the language. I'm working off of Ryan's Babcock suggestion for today's meeting.
IT is on the second. I thought IT was first.
So one of the edits that we'd like to make is we definitely want to collaborate on items that are common. The boilerplate things such as office, the office products and our financial products. Those are all things that we all have to commonly use together. But there are other unique things to the police department that just the city IT does not wouldn't have any knowledge or resource to on things that happen on the law enforcement side. So it's just, I wanted something, I just needed things a little bit more, so that it's shared responsibility. It sounds like everything's shifting over to the CIO. It'd be nice that the charter departments still feel like they're part of this language. So like, for number 4, for instance, emergency situations, the CIO has authority to take immediate protective action. That really doesn't state what that action is. One of my suggestions was that we say to safeguard city information systems and data. And the police department, you know, of course, would do that as well. We have a paragraph that I added, law enforcement IT infrastructure is segmented from the city information systems. The CIO and IT manager should immediately collaborate regarding any protective measures and safeguards that may impact operations or immediate action in either environment. And then, let's see, we still would like to keep that, all departments shall comply with these standards. Charter departments maintaining systems unique to their operational requirements and governed by other agencies, regulations, law shall review these elements with the CIO. I mean, that's something that we're already doing. I just feel like that needs to be spelled out. There's still to highlight some of the differences between city IT and police. We agree with Ryan's opening statement that the CIO has authority to establish IT standards for cybersecurity, compliance, system resilience, operational efficiencies, and shall be responsible for acquisition, maintenance, coordination, security, and regulatory compliance of all. The city information technology elements common across all municipalities, which is, again, just saying we have a lot of commonalities, but there's some things that we do not. The charter department shall retain these information technology functions, which by law or practice are unique and specific to this particular charter department. Just trying to keep a little bit of control over, because it seems ambiguous that everything just goes under the CIO.
So it feels to me that the concern, as you just said, is that there's no kind of roadmap to, if these changes go forward, who kind of, no flow chart of who, what, when, where.
Right, well, like in the case of emergency circumstances, like, you could take that and have a knee-jerk reaction, say, well, is the CIO gonna come in here and just shut us down? Well, no, we know that he's not, but it doesn't say that.
Yeah.
It just says he has,
Yes.
canvas of everything and will go and take action, where that should really involve the school IT and police IT.
I guess my question would be for regulatory council. Traditionally in the charter, do we have those specifics? I know some of the things in the charter have very specific line points, and obviously as we're going through and updating more, is that pretty standard to have it outlined or to outline after creation?
So what's interesting with regard to IT and HR is, you may recall, like 3 meetings ago, I looked at the sequence
Yes.
of events in the charter, and you'll see that the IT and HR provisions that say, hey, these should come and be managed by the municipalities, the municipal side of the house, those were later than the establishment of the police commission, the fire commission, and that original setup of the charter. And when you read the report that was circulated,
It was 2001, right?
yeah, that was for efficiency and kind of looking towards sort of things that you've articulated here. And I think, Ryan can certainly speak to this, and we can certainly tweak some language to make it clear what an emergency situation is, but you don't want to get in the weeds. Frankly, we could come up with SOPs and other pieces, but the thought is, if there is an emergency happening and Daisy is not available because she is one human being, that there is backup.
There's an
Of a
SOP
high
of what to
level
do.
backup in terms of, great, there's another person to call. And I don't think, Ryan can come and speak to this, but there is no interest in creating one
Migrating the
uniform
department.
system. This is, you have your own system. There are reasons why you have your own system. And yes, there are common elements and then there are uncommon elements, but that is true for literally every department. The fact that you have more okay, you've got more because you have a whole CGIS requirement and bubble need and regulatory need.
Correct.
But SCADA does as well.
Yeah.
You know, and so does, you know, frankly, even legal.
Yeah.
And so I think really the goal is not to completely disrupt, but simply to keep us thinking we need to continue to evolve our responsibilities because the threats are ever more, you know, apparent and frequent. And as the counselors say, you know, ultimately, if something goes wrong anywhere in the system, we all own it from a,
Correct.
you know, a responsibility, and we're gonna have to pay for whatever that cleanup cost is. So I think, does that kind of answer the question?
It does. I also think for me, there's in my layman's world, there's a difference of operations and oversight like I do not believe that we should be removing the day-to-day in general operations from your department.
Correct.
But the oversight part of me, my frustration as a counselor is the silos in which our charter departments work. And so, for me, part of this oversight of having this and in HR is that as a city councilor, I can go to the city manager and then there's not this trickle down. There's like, okay, there's one overarching person that she can pull information from. But I mean, I don't know how the other councilors feel, but I would be interested to have Ryan's opinion on how we can maybe integrate some of this wording, whether that opinion is live or an email later. I don't object to some of this wording. I think, you know, if it doesn't change the overarching effect of merging intelligence from the two separate entities, and it makes your department feel that there's a little bit more clarity, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? I'm okay with the, you know, I do agree with Suzanne that things like the emergency situations, that should be outlined in an SOP of what is declared an emergency, what emergency is on this side, what's on that side, what happens if there's separate emergencies, if we're attacked in taxes versus we're attacked for our right to know versus we're attacked in our server over there.
Correct.
But I think, you know, some of this wording I don't disagree with. I don't take any hardship with figuring out wording, because I think we're still getting to the end, which is a more collaborative conversation between the departments.
So can I just ask a question? You talked about silos and you asking the manager a question. What is an example of that? Because I don't understand why there would be an issue there.
Well, I think for me, it's more than just in governance. I think that our charter departments run in a lot of silos. I think the budget season gives everyone a reminder that we run in silos, and that, you know, I think between the council, the manager, and the charter departments, and that includes the commissions, there just needs to be more communication of what's going on in the city. I think a good example, I think a very clear example as we go into how we're not interacting enough is the conversation between you and I, Chief, where I talked about how the CIT is budgeted for the CIT school at the high school is budgeted for $26 million in 3 years for renovation, and we have to consider that while we're also considering $40+ million for a police station. And so I think when we talk about, for me as a city councilor, trying to pull down information, I can't directly go to you. I need to go to the city manager. And so for me, I think it's easier as someone who manages a much smaller staff to have somebody who Ryan can reach out to and say, hey, we're looking for this information. The council is, the city manager is, the assistant mayor is, can you help pull that together? Versus me not knowing where and what I can do. It's easier for me to go and talk to a department head through the city manager, if that makes sense.
And I have a question, I think that kind of mirrors what the assistant mayor's asking. How much of these concerns can be handled in operating procedures? Because I feel like a lot of these things are concerns about how we're going to interface. And I think the goal of ordinance language, at least, it's the one thing I've learned over 3.5 years of working in governance, the goal of ordinance language is to be a bit vague, because we don't want to have to go back and change it again and again as things change. We want to be able to have this language cover any scenario, and then have operating procedures on the side, which is, I think, what we're doing. You know, we're doing that also with updating encumbrance language, so that we have specific policies and operating procedures for every different type of encumbrance, but the ordinance itself will be extremely kind of limited in what it says. So the goal then, because ordinances are challenging to change. So for example, I mean, the concern I would always have is something would happen, you have a family member who's ill and you have to take a leave of absence. I don't want to have to go back and change the ordinance because, you know, the police department can't, you know, get a temporary person in there in time to, you know, for if you're out for 6 weeks to fill your role, and that there's a way it's much easier to change operating procedures, you know, for a short period of time to have and so I think that's the goal, is to create flexibility and also to create a better backup system for everyone. You know, I'm concerned that the police department only has a few staff that handle IT, because that to me means that we don't have enough backup redundancy in our staffing. But at the same time, if we were to hire for every department to have all of that, we would have too many employees on a regular basis. So that's always the concern I had, is making sure that we create these redundancies across departments. And that's how I see IT functioning.
I totally I agree with you on redundancy, because you'll never know what happens. But with this language, I know we want to keep not getting the weeds and we want to keep it a little vague, but it really seems like it's just taking a lot away from the charter departments. It seems to be pushing everything over to the CIO. And
Well, so we're talking a lot about being down in the weeds, so let me take it up 30,000 feet.
Yeah.
And I think there's a question about, I understand there's this, like, let's take the hacking example, and eventually that leads to ransomware, and we're in a situation where eventually the city would have to have accountability for that through finance to pay that off. I think in terms of statute, the school board, an elected group of people in the community, are exclusively given certain powers to do certain things, which they then push down onto me to do. And I think I think that there are elements of this when you start talking about acquisition. I think for us, like the acquisition language about that would be controlled by the CIO starts to supersede the statutory authority of the school board to control its operations. So I think there's a real question about what does New Hampshire state law empower school boards to do, and then where's the city's responsibility in relation to schools and or commission departments, and to what extent does this extend beyond what the city has legal authority to do.
And that's just the authority part, and like, you know, in line number 6 where it talks about nothing in the section shall deem to limit any authority vested in the city council and the city manager under the charter, but I think you should also have to the charter departments in there, not eliminating any of their authority.
I'm comfortable that the charter, after reading the commission report, I'm comfortable that the charter amendments were intentional in kind of bringing those pieces in-house, because in the sense of under the municipal realm, because if you read it, that's where they were going. And as a practical matter, having looked at, and let's leave the school for a second, because I do agree it's different.
Yep.
With regard to the police commission, when you look at kind of more their historical authority, it has been really more for officers. I mean, the fact that over time, it has grown to include a fairly robust administrative staff. Well, part of that is because we didn't have it on the municipal side, and you guys filled it rightly, as, you know, you needed to get your job done. So there's nothing wrong. That's the evolution. But as a practical matter, when you look at police commissions, a lot of it is geared towards that management of the officers, kind of, do you do body, like those policy questions that then get, financed or not by the city council. When you look at that historically, that's really where the bread and butter is in the management of the officers, the training, the pieces, and it's just over time. You had to do those other parts of the job, and you did them within the police department kind of rubric, as opposed to the city council deciding that they wanted to fund through the municipal government, which is not surprising because frankly, PD has generally had an easier ride, frankly, of we need this to do our job. Because it's, the public understands not wanting to live in fear, and to be safe in their neighborhood. And I think, in my 20 years here and your 20 years, it is, let's face it, you have an advantage in that, in the sense of, people want public safety, and that's fair. And so I think that's kind of what's happened. And I think we can certainly go back and kind of look at some of this language, but I think a lot of the, I don't want to say fear, but the discomfort of this change is because we are looking to kind of get a little more responsibility. And I do think there are opportunities for development, because you have staff, and there are opportunities that might be available in a broader sort of context, sort of kind of moving out of kind of just the PD bubble, and vice versa. Kind of looking at it more holistically as an organization. And I think that's part of it, is trying to figure out how do we get there. And it may be in part by doing some SOPs, because Councilor Cook is right. Whatever we put in here, we don't want to have to go back in 2 years. And that's really our challenge. Trying to find language that is respectful of kind of where we've been, what the unique needs are at PD, but also recognizing we're in a different environment. We are headed in a different direction over time, evolving, so that we get the benefits of the cross-training, the development, the more secure, nimble, looking for those opportunities. But I don't think anyone's looking to kind of blow up the current system. This has never been about jobs. This has just been about how do we do government better. And so I think that's the path we're trying to find through this process.
Which is great. So I feel that the language should contain that the charter department should be unique, and it should state that more throughout the language. That's just fine.
And I would say on ours, for mine, I mean, there's explicit, my understanding in statute, once the city has appropriated funds to the school department, at that point, the school department is in control of those funds. The elected representatives of the community via the school board are then the line item control of those funds. So then the acquisition language saying that CIO would our stuff would have to go through the CIO would, if I'm reading statute right, would be in opposition to statute.
I think there's a way to thread that needle, because I agree, the charter sets up a lot of control for the school board and ultimately to the extent it defers to you. I think there's a difference in terms of standards and maybe suggesting standards within that. And so I think, again, this may be something, I'm happy to look at that a little further, and maybe Ryan and I can noodle that out, because the goal is not to micromanage the number of purchases, but to look forward to, if you're, if Tom is looking to, hey, I think we should go in this direction, you'd like to think he's having a conversation with Ryan about, is this a secure means? Is there a way to get, a better bulk buy because you're gonna buy the same on the house side? Because keep in mind, procurement goes all your procurement stuff. I mean, I work with Kenny Lynchy all the time on doing your school roofs and that kind of stuff. So I think there's a way to make it work and honor what is in the charter in terms of procurement, but still have common standards and make sure we're leveraging what we know. For all we know, Daisy's got the best answer, you know, for something you want to buy, because even though it's two very different applications, you might have an experience with a vendor that says, oh, great deal, or no, you don't want to go down this path. And I think that's what we're trying to figure out, and that's why we're trying to figure out this structure of how to really take advantage of what we've got in the room. But I am mindful that the school, a little different from the PD, and that we've got to find a way to make that path work in a way that's respectful of your authority or the school's authority once the budget is over there. But I think standards, we might
I think
all
we're
agree
okay with
on.
the standards language.
Yeah.
And when you're having conversations with Tom, this idea of kind of universal standards about what's safe,
Yes.
what's whatever, that's great. I think when that acquisition piece that keeps showing up in drafts, I think that's where we get to.
Yes.
Yeah, and we might be able to kind of work on some language.
I'm happy to do, like, if we do a little tweak there on acquisition. I think the critical piece here is that ultimately, we also have to reassure the council and future councils that that all these technology acquisitions are the best for the city, not just operationally, but financially. And so I think that's probably why we included this language initially, is that you don't want to get to the council level and have the council asking you 50 questions about your technology acquisition. You want to know that there's some reassurance that, you know, we are getting the best deal for the city. You know, we just went through the process here in governance and then at the council of changing all of our procurement procedures so that we could potentially see savings, cost savings, and have more bidders. And so I think the goal is always more efficiency so that we can realize those efficiencies and we can spend our money more wisely, I think is the goal.
I mean,
I'd like to hear
Yes.
some of what Ryan has to say.
sure.
Thank you, Counselor. So as far as acquisition goes, like, pretty much everything the school buys is in the CIP for IT already. So I think that as far as matching what the reality is, like, it's in there. And so, you know, I don't think it's so far out of line to say that the CIO has some role in that CIP process. And as far as the language in the most recent version, I really had trouble with an imbalance with the previous language where it says the IT department's responsible, but then we have some, kind of that they shall coordinate and collaborate closely. So it's just an imbalance in responsibility. So if we're responsible, but then the charter departments are just only asked to collaborate, and I don't believe that it's correct to say that the IT department is responsible, because then if anything happens, you could ultimately lay the blame on the CIO or the IT department, even though we may not have been able to affect an outcome. And so when you see that the CIO has authority, and if you look at the things that are in the authority piece, it's standards, and then it lists a bunch, cybersecurity, compliance, system resilience, and operational efficiency. And the goal there was to establish sort of the what, this is how this is how we should do things, and then not interfere with the how we're doing them. Just to kind of, give it a little bit of a reality, say like, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody to say not to implement multi-factor authentication everywhere. So that, could be, just common sense, but we're not looking, I certainly don't have the time to delve into how in every application, in every system, is it, and so it's that kind of thing where it's like, we should be doing the, certain things a certain way, not necessarily delving into the how it's implemented or how it's, and I think that, kind of goes kind of across all areas. They're not unique or specific to any department, they're just common sense or best practices. And I thought this language was an improvement for the concise nature of it, and that it took out some of the, interpretation. So you didn't have to be a legal scholar to understand what the intent was. Or that it saves us from down the line if there was ever, differences of opinion, that, it saves some finger pointing about, who's responsible for what. Because however, or collaborate or coordinate could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. Like, that's just, so that was kind of my thinking going into it, is just to make it as clear as possible.
Councilor Taylor.
I think that's helpful, Ryan. I think you talked about you have the responsibility, but not necessarily the
Authority.
authority. I think there's a story here that we haven't surfaced. Right now in general government, we have systems as diverse as the SCADA system, the parking software, the sewer control systems, and we've managed to support those with one IT department. But the story is that we didn't have an IT department for many years. We had one individual in contract services. As a counselor, what I'm seeing is we're getting better at how we implement systems, how we operate systems. We're getting more efficient because we have an IT department. So, I would ask our charter departments, you may be missing out on some opportunities. We used to, when I ran Seacoast Media Group, we would often ask ourselves, if we had to go 50 miles away and start a newspaper, what systems would we want to have? And there were different disciplines within our industry. We had subscribers, we had advertisers, we created pages to go to the press. We had all these different disciplines, and we grew increasingly better as an organization by building a strong IT department that could see across all those different silos. So take a look at what the general government is doing. We're 3 or 4 years into having stood up an IT department, and all the experts and super users within their work groups are still doing what they're doing. But we're making sensible changes in how all the architecture works, or policies like two-factor identification. So I think we are benefiting from people saying it's okay to not have total control and report to just my department. It's okay to work with an IT department that works across all groups and all systems. And I think that was the reason in 2000 that the charter was changed. But we never had the IT department to make it happen until 3 or 4 years ago. So I would look at it that way.
Well, I agree, we didn't have those people, and therefore there was never any communication between the departments, because the city only had one person who was calling a contractor for any question that was asked, and we were doing everything in-house, but now the city's come in-house. I mean, these guys now have monthly meetings, so that open line of communication is constantly open. I don't think it's impacted by the language that's in these ordinances at all.
So I don't feel like the police IT's in a bubble of its own. We take advantage of anything we can through state of New Hampshire. We talk with Ryan and his department monthly. So we're not just in our own bubble. We are in our own unique culture of, we have public safety to think about. And we have those standards and regulations we have to meet. So it does put us in a little bit of a silo, because there's a lot of things that just are not under the realm of what Ryan can know about or keep track of. And that's why the police has their own IT department. And we still need to have some voice in there to say that. We have gone, before even, the IT had their department, we collaborated with many engineers and vendors, other municipal departments, agencies. We go to conventions and conferences, and we sit down and we collaborate and say what's going to be the best for this police department. And I've gone in different directions than what the city has because their needs are different. We have to have a backup center. They are working on that as well. But we've had this vision going long before there was an IT department on the city side. So we just like to make sure that our voice is still heard.
As far as procurements go, all the procurements go through CIP, so they're already going through the IT department prior to any of this, prior to us even having an IT department. So the budgeting piece has already been addressed, and that's not even part of this.
I have to leave you guys in just a few minutes to do interviews. I'll just say one last thing, and I appreciate the time. I think that I appreciate people trying to move towards efficiency. I think there is a real question about this function and about my understanding the city charter is the state law would take precedence over the city charter. The city cannot remove authority granted under state law to school boards. And that there are elements we're talking about right now that I think would try to do that. And maybe I don't understand the relationship between the charter and the RSA's.
I just have a question. Are we talking about expenditures or oversight? Because I think maybe that's what, certainly you have line item approval for the school board and clearly that's in the charter as well. But am I hearing, and again, I'm somewhat new to this nuanced conversation, is it overlapping oversight, or is it, truly, as you've said, expenditures? And I think maybe that's two separate things, because in the preliminary introductory paragraph of the charter departments, it clearly says you're governed by what's in this charter, but also you're governed by the administrative code, and that's this. So again, is that a subtlety? Is that somewhat the crux of the problem? Because you guys are right. Your expenditures go through CIP. Your school board has line item authority for your budget, but maybe we're just talking about some more of that overlapping oversight or communication, and just raise that for consideration.
So I think as soon as you get into oversight, you get into authority, and I think it's so where the RSA connected to school boards say one thing, and the charter could imply overlapping authority. If those things are in conflict, then I'm curious about where that puts us. So, and I apologize that I gotta go. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Back to what the assistant mayor, when she goes to the manager, asks a question, the question could be whether she comes to me or comes to Deezy, or, we can provide those answers, but we're never getting that question like when she's asking. So it seems like this is asking to have the ultimate authority to just go and make the decisions so that they know the answer because they're making decisions, and that's in actuality not how it occurs.
Yeah, let me just say, because we kind of talked a little bit about sort of strategic planning a little bit, what the department needs. And part of what we've seen over time is that sometimes, and not just the charter departments, but a department might sort of begin to have a vision, but don't bring in all of the stakeholders, who might include representatives from IT, maybe talking to the city council. Like, it needs to be a bigger conversation to, again, if you were starting new, what would you do? Because it's very easy, whether it's you're sitting in legal, or some other department, to kind of get in that view of, this is what my department needs, without recognizing that there is a whole. And I think that is part of what we're looking for, is how do we kind of keep the whole? Not that there aren't individual needs, whether it's a particular, HR software that the police, use for recruiting, because it's common throughout the state, and that's how it makes it easier for officers to apply, versus, and there's special CJIS requirements. But it's, if we're gonna do strategic planning, what does that look like? What does it look like for dispatch? Now, certainly, the fire department has its own special needs and requirements, and, other than some of the dispatch items, that's being handled by IT right now. SCADA team works very closely with Ryan, now that we have a Ryan and his team. So Mike Merrill and his team work closely, and it's a collaboration often rather than a hierarchical arrangement, but it's pulling,
Yeah, the city
same
has a great
direction.
team. Ryan's been great. I just feel like, I feel like through my years here, when that city did not have an IT department, we were very isolated.
Agreed.
There was no transparent, I feel like the police department was more transparent to the city. The city was not transparent with the police department.
Right.
And so that kind of causes that communication to just, it's not healthy, and it's a toxic relationship. I love working with Ryan and his team. Everyone's been great. I hope it stays that way. I just know that, Ryan may not be sitting in that seat someday. His team might, disband. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. I just want to make sure that I have a voice, whoever sits in that seat, going forward.
So I have a question, like if we were to write operating procedures and have operating procedures in place before we adopted that language, and the operating procedures made it extremely clear about authority and who's responsible for what, would that be more comfortable? Like, I'm just trying to figure out what would get us to the place we need to. Our goal in governance is for us to comply with the charter, and right now our administrative ordinance doesn't. And so, and a lot of the changes beyond just this language are changes to make us more in compliance with the charter. So, so if we get there, if we can get the operating procedures in place and everybody's comfortable with how we're actually going to function, will that put us in a better place to make these changes?
Without saying I'm like,
I'm
it's
not
definitely the answer.
Yeah.
But this is like the fire department. Yes, they've gone on the Ryan because they were coming to us and we were overburdened, couldn't handle it. And I went to the fire chief, I'm like, you guys need to get your own IT people because we can't help you with all your equipment and do that. We have 2 people, and then the decision was made to put it under the city IT because we now had a city IT department, which we didn't have before. So, and that's worked for them. It worked for everybody.
One of the big things that stands out from this whole conversation to me is like where responsibility lies. It's a lot easier for somebody who's a few steps down in the line, in the command structure or reporting structure, to say that it wasn't their fault, it wasn't their responsibility, and then if you don't have any oversight from somebody who can tell, like, are we doing the right things, or, then it gets muddy. And so, would anybody accept that this chief information officer of the city of Portsmouth was ignorant or not responsible for something that happened at one of the charter departments? And that's a big concern for me, because if something happened and we're in the national media, you see how fast these news stories get out, and something was to happen, would ignorance, because it was at a charter department, pass the test?
I don't think ignorance is an issue here. It's just that we want to be.
No, I'm saying
Obviously,
it's my reputation.
It is your reputation, but I think the charter department and the CIO take responsibility.
Well,
It
I'm
should
worried
be-
about how that plays out, though,
Right.
outside of this room where people understand the structure of the charter
And the
department
history and
and how it works here at the city. Because it's ultimately, if you say the CIO is responsible, then I should have the authority to act.
I think this is ultimately the bigger challenge, and this is what I was saying about the city manager ultimately takes responsibility, and then the council takes ultimate responsibility no matter where something happens in the city. And so there are some challenges with our charter because it divides out responsibility to different elected boards. But it's a matter of finding the right way that we kind of make the language work for us and make our operations work, I think. I mean, that's my take on it, is that so that everybody's comfortable with how we're functioning, and so that we do have emergency procedures in place, and we know at what point the CIO has to step in to assist, and ultimately, so then we know that you're not taking responsibility for something that you're not doing. Like that's kind of like, you don't ever want to put somebody in that situation, I think.
I think that was the reason for the change, as you explained, in the authority to set standards, trying to find that balance point of the overarching sort of goal setting, if you will, but recognizing, again, the uniqueness not only of PD, but SCADA and, other elements here, that there are responsibility points within the department. So that was, I thought it was actually a pretty good balance point of Ryan trying to find that sweet spot between recognizing that, there's a lot he's not gonna have, in some ways day-to-day responsibility for, because it's sitting in your lap or it's sitting in Mike Merrill's lap, but he's gonna have some overarching, are you taking certain precautions in terms of cybersecurity pieces and backups and other redundancies, but also kind of leverage the longer term efficiencies and strategic thinking across the organization. So, I'm cognizant of the time. I think we can take some of this, we can try and rework it again for the 23rd meeting. And, you let me know how you want to do this. We could work on some one-on-one with Ryan and Daisy and see if, we take these pieces and try and.
Yeah, I'm not gonna call
Piece them
Erica on the interest of time, but the same thing with HR is the same issues.
So what I'm hearing is really, I think, Councillor Cook, your suggestion is a good one, is to try to put some meat on the bones in some standard operating procedures, because I think everybody is working towards the same goal, but we're having concerns about the language. So, lawyers can run a train through the language, right? And so you're concerned exactly how is this gonna play out? So it's a day-to-day operational issue. I don't think that the language is attempting to take complete control over that. But there's that question of what is, oversight? Does that equal authority? How much authority?
Correct, yeah.
How much responsibility? And all of those things maybe need to be sorted out through more detailed SOP type procedure, so that you're comfortable with the language that's in the ordinance because it's been given some definition.
Correct.
Is that?
Really, a question I would have is, like with the HR department, if we have a particular piece of software that is pertinent and unique to a police department that we need, but the HR department doesn't think we need it,
Right.
so they don't have any authority in that discussion, because it's something that we need to run our police department. It may not work with the city, but there's usually an interface that can be built to do it, which we've done with several other pieces of software here. But the way that is written there, if the HR department didn't agree with it, then I would have to, make an argument about it.
And this is, that language, maybe that's something that we can tweak there, where it says must receive prior approval, maybe it's consultate, like, maybe there's a different word there that's a little softer.
It's all
that we
about
can work on.
communication, like,
Yeah.
like you said, everybody's been in silos, but that's the way the city's run for years. And now that you're getting staffing in place that you can accommodate some of these things, we work together. We've had a great working relationship with Ryan and Patricia before him, you know, but those options weren't available prior to, you know, and obviously they take time. It doesn't happen overnight.
And I think the goal here of the committee is to get the language so that as those collaborations grow and change, and that we don't need to come back and change this language again and again, that it's in compliance with our charter, but it also gives enough leeway that everyone can operate effectively. And so I would love to, I don't know if the committee's okay with this, if we have IT sit down with the other departments and kind of come up with some kind of operating procedures so that we have those day-to-day operating procedures going forward, and then we can make sure that the language fits and everybody's comfortable with the language based upon what we know what operations actually look like. How does everyone feel about that? There would have to be a deadline, because we will have to have language approved by this committee essentially by end of August to go through the council process on time, because of the time frame. It'll take 4 council meetings at least, and we need to give at least leeway for 1 or 2. Otherwise, all of our work on this is for naught for this year. So how does everyone feel about that?
Well, I think it's what I want to see is I want to see Ryan and your department and school, health department, get those procedures, those policy level types of things done. That would really help, I think, putting the guardrails on what we're trying to do.
So I'm gonna push back slightly that I prefer not to have the whatever we're calling them, SOPs or how we're gonna operate, be something that this committee is going to be kind of wordsmithing or deep dive, because that goes in from my point of view, the management function. But just to know that we've reached some accord in terms of the process sufficient that we could land someplace and inform this committee on where we landed, so that decisions could be made about potential language. And like I said, I think the challenge of this language is we have an existing kind of history and consideration of where we are, but trying to structure the language so it does evolve. And I will be very frank that there is an intention to make sure that if the police department is gonna go rogue and buy a piece of software that we actually think collectively you didn't make a good case for and would be a waste of taxpayer money, I will be honest, I wanna be able to say no to that and say, sorry, don't know why you think this is the solution. With all due respect, it's got to be one of these other two solutions, or that one is too insecure, and I'm only picking on you because we're discussing it, but because I think HR is completely fine with the solution that you have right now, based on my conversations with Kelly. But I'm cognizant we do have our with procurement. Luckily, everyone went along with that. We changed the ordinance, we got new software, the departments are learning it, we're getting additional vendors, and we're getting some commonality, so it's doing what we hope to do. And again, as we roll out templates, hopes to be better, but we do have ERP coming. And I expect that we are gonna get pushback from some departments about elements of it that they are not gonna like, because it won't be as familiar, it might be more transparent, it's gonna potentially give accounting more control. So I am cognizant, and I don't wanna, like I said, not share that I do think we are gonna have these tough conversations. And I think from a management point of view, we are looking for a little more budgetary control. We are looking for, when you're doing that strategic planning, it's not just in your department, you're taking in what does it mean financially for the city, what does it mean for security, kind of looking at all of that. And that means we will have these tough conversations and it's not always gonna be everyone agrees on everything. But I think we can make some effort to see, you know, when I can look at this, not listen, and actually read, maybe there is some kind of bits and pieces we can put in the current language, and then again, maybe there's some conversations we can have to see, is there some comfort level on how this would be deployed day to day? And happy to give that another go. And see where we are on June 23rd, which I think is our next meeting.
And I don't think that the committee doesn't wanna see.
Yeah.
We just wanna know that
Yeah.
that the
That
arrangements
there's
are
a
in
process.
place
Yeah,
and that that people are more comfortable with having those outlined
Yeah.
before we move forward. I
Yeah.
think that's what I'm asking is I don't want anyone to feel like we're trying to do an end run around them and then suddenly we're gonna change how all of the operations work, because I absolutely don't think that's your goal.
No, I thought, and I really believe that this language, like, protected the operations.
Yeah.
Because we're only talking about standards, not,
Right.
not function, so.
So is everyone comfortable with that, Councilor Taylor?
Yeah, I don't wanna wordsmith that stuff. I don't want any part of it.
And it'd be helpful to get clarity on school department and
Yeah.
state statute and.
Yep.
You know, I think,
yeah, I noticed, I was looking, I'm like, yeah.
I think that's a bigger area, of course, than police, and,
It
you
is,
know, I could picture it where all of a sudden the police department has to track all kinds of new information on students they didn't have to track. If they're using their own dedicated resource and have no help from anybody else, how's that gonna go compared with if they're part of a team and a CIO who can take the case to the council through the city manager?
What I would just like to point out is like I feel the police department, we always adhere to the procurement policies. But in the past, CDIT has made recommendations to me that I didn't agree with. And it just seems like I would have no voice to say, well, this is why I think you're incorrect and this is why I feel this is better for our environment.
you would have a voice, but I would tell you even today, the final decision would be on the municipal side of the house. Because that PO would not get approved if I'm hearing, and I might send it out for a third-party review, because if I hear, no, here's why I would really recommend against it, then I might say, well, let's send it out for a third party and get someone else's, if you feel it's not legit.
Mhm.
But ultimately, that PO is gonna get approved by finance.
So like when we demoed our police software, we had to go through,
Yeah.
it took us years to go
Yep.
through the demo process and to vet out who we wanted, and we had to meet all the criteria.
Yep.
But we in the end had to argue, and we documented it so that you,
Because we
municipality
had
would
those
have a-
conversations,
Right,
it was good, it was
well,
good
this works
conversation.
for us,
Yeah.
and that was like,
Yeah.
I had to go and do tours of other agencies that had that particular software and say, no, it's just not good for us.
Yeah.
But he may say, well, yeah, but bird's eye view, it's cost efficient. It still does what you need to do.
You're gonna have to, I would tell you right now what I just said, which is, if you're getting a different recommendation out of IT, then we're gonna have to figure out how we solve that at the management level, sitting with the chief, sitting with you, sitting with Ryan, and maybe it's a independent third party who says, why do they wanna go this route?
Mhm.
Because we have concerns, or maybe someone changes his mind after hearing more, so, but that's the way it is right now.
Yeah, but I don't think, that's not gonna be an issue because we work together now.
Exactly, because we did work together. Right,
You know,
that's what I'm trying to say,
Brian, you didn't have the experience to be able to tell us
Right.
what you thought about it.
Right.
And there's been
Right.
evidence to show that, we've made right choices, the city hasn't, and vice versa, so.
It's always an adventure. But the way it is now, and it wouldn't just be PD that I've held something up to say, wait a minute, someone's gonna have to come in here and justify this.
That's just like with HR, you know, we use Police App now,
Yeah.
which works for our environment. HR is like, nope, we have this, it does what you need. You're
And
done using
And
that,
that comes up
and
to
that's what,
management,
yeah, and that's what we don't want to happen.
and that's gonna come to management, and that's the way it should be. That's why there is upper level management to look at differences between departments. So,
Maybe this is the kind of thing that you can outline
Yep.
internally
Mhm.
so that it's really clear that there's a process. You know, that's something that when we're talking about encumbrance that we were asking for in our last meeting was an appeals process. I know that's an external appeals process, but I think there's always a process there.
I mean, we
Yeah,
use different softwares for internal investigations and discipline for an officer. We use all kinds of different software that are specifically developed for that.
and I'm not saying those aren't appropriate, I'm just saying there's a better process now and a little more insight on it, but ultimately, all of that goes through finance and should go through finance, and those POs get looked at.
Well, they currently do now.
Yeah, exactly, so it's not any change to what we do now.
Yeah.
And I think I've been pretty helpful in the various ways you've tried to procure stuff in a changing environment and supportive, and I think that there's a process, and
And just to speak towards like the communication piece, like, you know, you guys are working on a huge CAD solution and it affects everything that you guys are gonna do on a day-to-day basis. And you know how anything that starts, there's always like people who are repeating things or they don't understand it or they're like, why are we doing this, or things like that. And so I think that the relationship we do have lets us kind of tamp down on that stuff too, so that, you know, anytime we're making a big decision, that we're moving together, and you know, and that it just it helps create more of that unified messaging amongst the municipal and the police too. So I think it's to our benefit from that regard, that there's no question about what one or the other is doing, because we're not just doing it individually, we're kind of doing it more together now.
I agree.
So we can certainly schedule something with Ryan and Daisy and the appropriate parties to work something out and report back on the 23rd.
Great. Thank you.
But
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. This is good. This is very helpful. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next item on the agenda, update on the encumbrance ordinance drafting.
I too will be reporting back at the next city council meeting.
Fine.
One of my understanding of the deliverable that the committee was looking for was basically guidance process for the city manager. And we had discussed four basic means by which encumbrances could come forward to the city council. One was on the consent agenda, that you know, items could be pulled off. The other was sort of informational, like a report back from the city manager, whether that be monthly. Another concept was sort of an omnibus approval, you know, sort of a generic one fell swoop with a broader amount of encumbrances. And then the aspirational one was the direct report emailed, generated from our wonderful new systems, which we don't quite have yet. But so I guess the guidance process, the document that we're looking for would be somewhat dependent upon sort of what path we chose for the report back. And the other issue which occurred to me too is sort of that appeal process, like what you just mentioned. And whether that's to the city council, to a non-approving department, you know, or a board. And there is an RSA that talks about licensing boards. Dover has a licensing board. It doesn't track the language of the RSA exactly, but it does have the city manager, the police chief, and other individuals approved by the city council. So these are all interesting concepts, but it's hard to draft sort of guidance without knowing which way we might be heading. And so I understand, we had a lot of great commentary on changes to the existing ordinances and sort of those processes. You identified all the gray areas that we were not capturing, and what you want to incorporate: special events, non-metered streets, narrow streets where things aren't passed for these kinds of things. And we talked also about like how some other things may help solve some of these problems in the future, like neighborhood parking program and, things relative to parking and trailers and dumpsters and such. So I think the best bet would be for me to report back on other samples of what other cities have done. And I've started that research. I've looked at Dover, I've looked at Manchester. Unfortunately, my goal of making it really simple and really brief has not yet been realized by the limited research I have done and the samples that I have seen. However, I do think we can get there. I do think we can. I'm going to show and tell very briefly, and I know we've done a lot of interesting work. This is Manchester's special event guidance, which is many pages, and this is their application, which I found online. So, again, very, very, far more complicated, I think, than we originally understand when we talk about cross-referencing these permits and kind of getting everything organized. So, I think if I could perhaps summarize examples, if I could get examples and just give you a summary of, city, ordinance, not reproduce those ordinances, but say what the appeal process is, what's the scope, and just give you some examples, and then you can direct sort of the samples you like best or the structure that you like best, because I think we all don't want another 50 pages between the taxi ordinance and chapter 6, chapter 8, all of those lovely chapters. Most of the other examples have eliminated and consolidated a lot of that. Some are governed by statute, so they're baked in. So we can get there. It's just a lot more cross-referencing, I think, than I originally thought. If that's okay, get some samples and some different samples of structure. And then we can populate guidelines and do drafting once we really have a very clear roadmap, because the road could go in various directions. Thoughts?
I'm just absorbing all that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yes, it is. And it's like the layer of the onion, once you start to do it, and then you peel another layer. And, we're not the first people to tackle
The
this.
use cases from
We've inherited an really ancient ordinance schemes on these things. A very few, and again, this is not a decision, obviously, that I have anything to do with, as we have seen from our department heads and our charter departments. We have a licensing agent, that's the city clerk. Many of these other municipalities have done away with that concept, and it's either a licensing board or things are baked in. Different departments do the approval of certain types of events and permits, and some are in, like we do, the DPW universe, and some are in the clerk's universe, and some are in the community development universe. So it's very interesting, actually, but it's not a one size fits all. Seems to me it's really what we would like to see.
I guess an immediate thought is simplicity is probably the goal.
Right.
And beyond that, I don't know what to say about all those other
Right.
opportunities to do this. I don't know which one would have the simplicity.
So the whatever is the simplest to draft and administer seems to be what this committee is looking for.
Well, I can only speak for me.
I'm wanting just to make sure that there's still oversight.
Yes.
Yes, well, of
With
course.
appeal or whatever that oversight is.
Appeal.
Mhm.
And
course.
it makes me kind of veer towards, some of the like having all the encumbrances listed on the
Yes.
consent agenda. Because instead of informational, just so
Yeah.
that they could be pulled
Yes.
out if
Yep.
necessary. So if somebody came to public comment and said,
The neighbors could show up.
the neighbors could show up, and so even though we're very unlikely to discuss them, somebody could pull something out if they needed to.
And that's a very workable suggestion.
Yeah, and so then it's not a requirement that we discuss them all. And currently, we have a lot of like requests for parades or those things are already
Come.
in there. So maybe instead of having all encumbrances, some of them separately, they could all come there instead. And we just have them categorized, special events, signs, and kind of list it out instead. And so then somebody could come and say something if they wanted to, and we could pull it out if we wanted to, but it wouldn't be necessary. We wouldn't have to go through quite the same process, I think. Does that make sense?
So we could create a report form that you get everything that would have, a document that would have this populated perhaps.
I like it as a consent agenda though.
Yeah, but it's on the consent agenda, so you get the one report of the consent agenda, and anything contained within that report could be pulled off.
So on the big agenda, it's just one item?
I'm thinking report
Permits,
back on
and then we have
encumbrances, yeah, and then there's a document that lists everything I don't know.
So, can I just add? So a lot of these encumbrances, special events, and et cetera, are time
Yes.
dependent because they apply late. And it may not give the council enough time to decide if they want oversight over the, approval. But are you looking at approval or the potential for, if something was denied, the council would want an opportunity to give process?
I think it's a little bit of both. So there's the encumbrance piece. I think the concern is that if somebody, say, wants to block a segment of space downtown for a certain period of time, and the neighbors aren't happy with that, but the city approves it, I think the council would want to be in a position that we could take comment on it if there were people who are unhappy and still have kind of some say in that process. So those might be delayed a little. I mean, they're delayed a little bit now already because we're already doing that. But instead of having the direct review, it would just come in as part of consent agenda, and we could pull it out if we needed to pull it out, but we wouldn't necessarily be discussing it separately. Right now, we discuss those when they come up separately.
They come in, city manager item requiring action.
Exactly.
Your special event letters come in. We're also creating a permit for that as we speak, and we are trying to vet them in advance before they come to you, rather than you get them well in advance of the event. We're trying to populate a form document that will be generated so that there's more consistency, and that the event has been fully vetted almost before you even get that letter, as opposed to, getting a letter and then, people advertising events and then not having the final logistics and approval. So there's a lot of discussion regarding that. That's somewhat in the works. We have a beta for the permit, but we haven't yet. We're going to meet with the city manager. Is this the right direction? And then roll it out in that regard. So there might be some, that might just be a viewpoint permit situation that generates a request to council after that has taken place and a form, you know, but.
It seems like the more appropriate place for the council to weigh in anyway is, you know, after details have been worked out and then
Right.
then the council says,
Exactly.
you know, it's in the consent agenda, it's approved. But then if somebody is denied, maybe then they have the opportunity to say, can I appeal? And it comes in as a city manager item for review, instead. So they have
That's an
that,
idea to do it that way,
you
yeah.
know. So that's when the council would actually have to discuss the item. Or not, it's council's choice.
Right, but
That's a good way to structure it.
it would come under the same part of the agenda.
Yeah.
The consent agenda makes it really transparent. It's
Yeah,
visible.
I think so.
You know, we may not get to the ultimate dream, but just moving to consent agenda speeds us up from where we are now. And try that for a year or two and see what happens.
See how that works, sure. Well, that's really helpful guidance to me, so I appreciate it. And I'll,
Yeah, I don't think I wanna form a separate committee. That, you know, just
License board.
license board.
Seems like a lot.
it does.
Yeah.
It does. But this gives public comment, this gives transparency, that structure simplifies things for purposes of what comes to you and what actions you take. You're seeing it, you're aware of it. It doesn't, I think, create an undue extra effort or burden on the agenda creation or anything like that. We can generate that form pretty easily, I think.
I just wanna make sure that things that are not allowed, that the driving cattle through Market Square stays in there.
Okay. Councilor Lombardi
I just-
wants the house to stay, all right.
You're okay with the carts with the meat?
Well,
You never know where we're headed as a society.
You never know.
Things change.
You never know. Okay, so that's very helpful. Thanks, and we'll bring something forward for the next,
great,
next meeting.
thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't think that there's anyone else in the room or, I don't have other business and I don't see anyone here for public comment. No announcements. Our next meeting is in a few weeks on the 23rd, I believe. And,
11 o'clock.
and, that's it, unless there are any other announcements. Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You're adjourned.